The Whisper, the Valdrine Empire, had conquered 17 star systems without firing a single shot. Their method was elegant, surgical. They didn't need weapons when they had the him, a psychic frequency that rewrote minds like corrupted code, turning entire populations into willing servants within hours. Planets fell silent, then rose again, singing the Empire's praises. Resistance was impossible. You couldn't fight what lived inside your own thoughts. Commander Jask stood on the bridge of the Imperial Dreadnought Eternal Voice, watching the blue-green planet rotate below. Earth, primitive, isolated, perfect. Begin the hymn, he ordered. The ship's neural amplifiers hummed to life. Invisible waves of psychic energy cascaded down through the atmosphere, touching every mind on the surface. Jask watched the planetary scanner, waiting for the telltale signs. Mass confusion, then acceptance, then worship. But the scanner showed nothing. Amplify, Jask commanded, his confidence wavering. The engineers doubled the output. The hymn grew so powerful that Jask could feel it vibrating in his own skull, even through his mental shielding. On any other world, this would have caused instant conversion. Cities would already be painting his face on their buildings. The scanner remained unchanged. Commander, his second officer whispered, They're still fighting, still moving independently. It's as if they can't hear us at all. Jask's three eyes narrowed. In 800 years of imperial expansion, no species had ever resisted the hymn. It was biologically impossible. Every sentient brain in the known galaxy shared the same fundamental neural architecture, the same pathways the hymn exploited. Send down the assessment team, he said quietly. I want to know what makes these humans different. Dr. Sarah Chen had been having the worst headache of her life for 3 hours. It started during her morning coffee, a pressure behind her eyes that felt like someone was screaming directly into her brain. She'd taken aspirin, ibuprofen, even tried her emergency migraine medication. Nothing helped. And she wasn't alone. The hospital waiting room was packed with people holding their heads, looking miserable but functional. Mass hysteria, her colleague Dr. Patel suggested, pressing an ice pack to his temple. Or maybe solar flares? Some kind of electromagnetic thing? Sarah didn't think so. The headache had a rhythm to it, almost like music, but music that made her teeth ache and her vision blur at the edges. She was about to suggest calling the CDC when the sky split open. Not literally, but that's what it looked like when the massive ship decloaked above the city, blotting out the sun. It was beautiful in a terrible way, all flowing curves and bioluminescent patterns, like a jellyfish made of starlight and nightmares. The headache stopped. Silence fell over the city, broken only by car alarms and distant screams. Sarah stood in the parking lot, staring up at the impossible thing hanging in the sky, and felt her scientific worldview shatter like dropped glass. A beam of light descended from the ship. When it faded, 3 figures stood in the parking lot. They were tall, maybe 7 feet, with elongated limbs and faces that were almost humanoid, but wrong in subtle ways. 3 eyes arranged in a triangle, skin that shimmered between purple and blue. Their mouths moved, but the words appeared directly in Sarah's mind, bypassing her ears entirely. Why do you not sing? Sarah's mouth was dry. Around her, people were frozen, staring. Someone was crying. Someone else was filming on their phone with shaking hands. I don't understand, she managed. The lead alien tilted its head, studying her like she was a lab specimen. You should be singing our glory. You should be welcoming your new purpose. Every species hears the hymn. Every species surrenders. A pause. Why are you still afraid? Because, Sarah said, her voice steadier than she felt. You're standing in our parking lot telling us we're supposed to be your slaves. The alien's expression was impossible to read, but something in its posture changed. It looked back at the ship, then at Sarah again. Your minds are loud, chaotic. There is no harmony, only noise. It stepped closer, and Sarah fought the urge to run. How do you think at all? How do you function in such disorder? And that's when Sarah understood. The headache. The pressure. It wasn't an attack. It was a signal they couldn't process. And these aliens, these conquerors who had subjugated 17 civilizations, had never encountered a species whose thoughts were too messy, too complicated, too beautifully broken to be overwritten. She smiled. Just a little. You can't reprogram chaos, she said. The alien stared at her for a long moment. Then it turned and walked back into the beam of light. As the aliens lifted away, Sarah heard its final words echoing in her mind. Report to the Empire, Earth is GU incompatible. Recommend quarantine protocols. Humanity is immune to the HIM. The ship hung in the sky for another hour, silent and waiting. And below, 7 billion humans kept thinking their loud, messy, unconquerable thoughts. The Council, the Valdrine High Council, convened in the sphere of voices, a chamber where thought itself became visible. Swirling patterns of light that represented the collective consciousness of the Empire's ruling minds. Commander Jask stood at the center, feeling the weight of 1,000 psychic gazes pressing down on him. Explain, the eldest voice demanded, resonating through dimensions. 17 worlds bent to our will in mere hours. Yet this Earth resists for 3 cycles without effort, without even understanding what we attempted. Jask projected his memories into the sphere. The assessment team's findings materialized as floating data streams, brain scans, neural mapping, recorded interviews with humans. The Council absorbed it all in seconds. What they saw disturbed them. Human minds were fractured, contradictory. A single human could hold opposing beliefs simultaneously and somehow function. Their thoughts didn't flow in orderly patterns but crashed together like waves in a storm, memory mixing with imagination, logic tangled with emotion, conscious thought buried under layers of instinct and dream. They argue with themselves, one council member observed, horrified. Constantly. Their own minds are at war. How do they build civilizations? Another asked. How do they create anything? Jask had asked the human doctor, Sarah Chen, the same question during his second visit to the surface. She'd actually laughed, and said, "We don't know. We just try things until something works. Make mistakes, argue about them, try again." The council fell silent, processing this absurdity. "They are dangerous," the eldest voice finally pronounced, "not because they are strong, but because they are unpredictable. The HIM requires order to function. It requires minds that follow logical pathways. These humans," a pause heavy with concern, "these humans think in ways that cannot be predicted or controlled. They are a contamination risk." "Then we destroy them," Jask suggested, trying to salvage his reputation. "Conventional warfare. Orbital bombardment. They have no defense against our fleet." "No." The word hung in the sphere, absolute. "We do not destroy what we do not understand. Earth will be quarantined. No contact, no observation. We will seal this system and let humanity remain isolated. If their chaos is contained, it cannot spread." Jask felt relief and disappointment war within him, an emotion uncomfortably similar to the human condition. "And if they develop faster than light travel? If they reach beyond their world?" The eldest voice flickered with something that might have been fear. "Then we hope," it said quietly, "that they prove to be allies rather than enemies. Because a species that cannot be controlled, cannot be conquered, must either be befriended or avoided, and the Valdrine Empire does not make friends easily." 6 months later, Sarah Chen stood in what used to be a university lecture hall and was now the headquarters of the newly formed Department of Xenopsychology. The walls were covered in equations, brain scans, and printouts of the alien language they'd begun to decode from the brief encounter. "They're still up there," her assistant Marcus said, pointing to the tracking display. 3 Valdrine ships maintained orbit beyond the moon, watching, waiting. "Been there for weeks. Not moving, not communicating, just observing." Sarah nodded, studying the data from their attempts to understand the HIM. It was fascinating, actually, a psychic frequency that could rewrite neural pathways, turning individuals into extensions of a collective consciousness. For any species with ordered logical thought patterns, it was irresistible. But human brains didn't work like that. Humans had evolved from survival, from being prey animals who needed to watch for predators while gathering food, while remembering where home was, while planning for winter, while feeling fear, while feeling hope, while being hungry, while being tired, all at once. All the time. Human consciousness wasn't a single voice. It was a committee that never agreed on anything. And somehow that chaos, that beautiful, frustrating, exhausting chaos, had saved them. "Dr. Chen?" A young intern poked her head through the door. "The UN ambassador is here. Says it's urgent." Ambassador James Rodriguez looked like he hadn't slept in days. He probably hadn't. The entire planet was still reeling from first contact, and the geopolitical implications were staggering. "We've been monitoring the Valdrine communications," he said without preamble, pulling up a holographic display. "Our linguists have been working with your psychic analysis. We're starting to understand their language." "And?" Sarah asked, though she already suspected what was coming. "They're arguing. About us." Rodriguez pulled up translated fragments. "There's a faction that wants to destroy Earth before we become a threat. Another faction that thinks we might be useful allies, because we're immune to the him. We could interact with species they've been unable to control. And a third faction that's just scared of us." Sarah read through the intercepts, her heart racing. Words jumped out. "Chaos species. Unpredictable. Potential weapon. Containment failure risk. They see us as a disease," she murmured. "A mental virus that could infect their perfect order. Or," Rodriguez said carefully, "they see us as something that could shatter their entire empire. Think about it, Sarah. They've conquered 17 worlds using mind control. But what happens when those worlds learn there's a species that's immune? What happens when the oppressed realize the him can be resisted?" Sarah met his eyes, understanding dawning. "We're not just immune," she said slowly. "We're proof that their power has limits. We're proof that their control can fail." "Exactly." Rodriguez pulled up a star map showing the 17 conquered systems, then drew lines connecting them to Earth. "The Valdrine Empire is built on a lie that resistance is impossible. We just expose that lie by existing." Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Sarah thought about the 3 ships hanging in the darkness beyond the moon. She thought about 17 civilizations singing someone else's song. She thought about humanity's messy, chaotic, beautiful minds that couldn't be tamed or controlled or made to march in lockstep. "What do we do?" she asked quietly. Rodriguez smiled, but it wasn't a happy expression. It was the smile of someone who'd just realized they were standing at a crossroads of history. "We have 2 choices," he said. "We stay quiet, stay isolated, and hope the Valdrine leave us alone, or," Sarah prompted. "Or we reach out to the 17 worlds. We show them what we are. We show them that the him can be broken." He paused. "We start a revolution." Sarah looked at the star map, at the conquered worlds shining like captured fireflies in the darkness. She thought about billions of minds singing songs they never chose. She thought about what humans had always been: messy, contradictory, chaotic, and free. "How long until we crack faster than light travel?" she asked. Rodriguez checked his tablet. "Engineering teams estimate 18 months. Maybe less if we can reverse engineer any Valdrine tech." Sarah nodded slowly, her decision crystallizing. "Then we have 18 months, she said, to figure out how to teach 17 civilizations to be beautifully, impossibly, uncontrollably human." Above them, beyond the sky, the Valdrine ships maintained their vigil. They were waiting to see what humanity would choose. They wouldn't have to wait much longer. The Song of Chaos. 14 months later, the first human ship punched through the fabric of space and emerged in the Korath system, the third world to fall to the Valdrine Empire, and the closest to Earth. The ship was small, barely larger than a shuttle, and its hull was covered in strange markings. Not weapons, not armor, art, paintings of Earth, mountains and oceans, cities and forests, faces of every color and expression, and words written in 300 human languages. "You are not alone. You can be free." Captain Maria Santos sat in the pilot's seat, her heart hammering against her ribs. Behind her, a team of 12 specialists, linguists, neuroscientists, artists, musicians, and one very nervous diplomat, checked their equipment one final time. "Valdrine warships inbound," her co-pilot announced. 3 of them. "They'll be in weapons range in 4 minutes. "Good," Maria said, surprising herself with how steady her voice sounded. "That means we have 4 minutes to change the galaxy." She opened a broadband transmission on every frequency, psychic and electromagnetic. The message was simple, repeated in the Korath native language and backed by something the team had spent months developing: a counter-frequency to the hymn. Not a replacement. Not another form of control. Just noise. Beautiful, chaotic, human noise. "People of Korath," Maria said into the microphone, while behind her, the transmission array broadcast the sound of Earth. Laughter and arguments, music and traffic, crying babies and barking dogs, symphonies and street performers, waves and wind and 7 billion voices talking over each other. My name is Maria Santos. I'm from a world called Earth, and I'm here to tell you something the Valdrine don't want you to know. The Valdrine ships were closing fast. Warning messages flooded her comm system. Each one a psychic scream demanding silence. She ignored them. You think you chose this? Maria continued, watching her scanner as the counter frequency spread across the planet below like ripples in a pond. You think you welcome the Empire. You think you love your masters. But that's not your voice. That's not your song. The Valdrine rewrote your minds and they've kept you singing their melody for 12 years. On the planet's surface, something was happening. The sensors showed it first. Neural patterns fluctuating, the uniform harmony of the hymn beginning to fracture. Then came the transmissions, confused voices speaking in their own language for the first time in over a decade. What? What is this? I remember. I remember saying no. I remember fighting. Why did I stop fighting? Where have I been? The lead Valdrine warship opened fire. Maria's pilot threw them into evasive maneuvers, but the ship wasn't built for combat. The first blast clipped their starboard engine, sending them spinning. Keep transmitting, Maria shouted over the alarms. Don't stop the signal. Below them, the planet was waking up. 12 years of suppressed memories, stolen choices, and silenced voices came flooding back all at once. Cities that had been perfectly orderly erupted into chaos. Not violence, but confusion, grief, rage, and something more powerful than all of them combined: hope. The Korath were remembering how to think their own thoughts. Another blast struck the human ship, and the hull began to buckle. Maria gripped her seat, watching the transmission strength indicator. Still broadcasting, still sending the counter frequency, still showing the Korath that another way was possible. Captain, her communications officer gasped, we're getting transmissions from the surface, hundreds of them, thousands. Maria pulled up the feed and tears blurred her vision. Thank you. We remember now. Tell your world we heard you. Tell your world we're free. The third Valdrine blast should have destroyed them, but it never came. Instead, a new ship emerged from FTL, not Valdrine. Not human. Something else entirely. Its hull was crystalline, refracting starlight into rainbow patterns. And when it positioned itself between the human shuttle and the Valdrine warships, Maria understood. The Korath had defense systems the Valdrine had never let them use. And now, awake for the first time in 12 years, they'd just decided to protect the humans who'd freed them. The Valdrine ships hesitated, recalculating. This wasn't supposed to happen. Conquered worlds didn't resist. They didn't remember how, but the Korath were remembering everything. Commander Jask watched the tactical display in horror as his perfectly ordered universe collapsed around him. It started with Korath. Then, within hours, the human transmission had been relayed to Mevlon, the fifth conquered world. Then Trath, then Orvex. Each planet heard the message, heard the proof that minds could resist, that the hymn could be broken, and something impossible happened. They chose to wake up. Not all of them. Not even most of them at first. The hymn was strong, and breaking its hold required something the Valdrine had never anticipated. The desire to be uncomfortable, to be uncertain, to think thoughts that contradicted themselves and hurt and confused and made no logical sense. It required the willingness to be human, or at least human-like. Sir, his tactical officer reported, voice shaking. We're detecting similar transmissions from Earth. They're launching dozens of ships, hundreds, all broadcasting the counter frequency, all heading to different systems. Jask pulled up the strategic map. The Empire's perfect web of control was developing holes, small ones at first, but growing, spreading. Recall all forces to the core worlds, he ordered. Establish a defensive perimeter. Prepare for, he stopped. Prepare for what, war? These humans hadn't fired a weapon. They'd just shown people an alternative to the hymn. They'd just proven that chaos could coexist with civilization. That imperfect thoughts were still thoughts worth thinking. How did you fight an idea? Commander, a new voice interrupted, the eldest council member speaking directly into his mind. Stand down, but stand down. Earth has not attacked us. They have not threatened us. They have simply existed. And by existing, they have shown our subjects that our control can end. A long pause, heavy with something that might have been sorrow. The empire built on the hymn is over. We must adapt or we will fall. Jask felt his certainty crumble. 800 years of expansion, 17 worlds. All of it based on the assumption that order would always triumph over chaos. Humanity had just proven that assumption wrong. 1 year later, Sarah Chen stood on a space station orbiting Korath Prime, looking out at a galaxy that had transformed. The Valdrine Empire hadn't fallen exactly, but it had changed. The hymn was forbidden now, outlawed by the new Galactic Accord that humanity had helped negotiate. The 17 worlds were independent again, struggling and messy and beautifully free. Some were angry. Some were grateful. Some were both at once in that contradictory human way. The Valdrine themselves were adapting slowly, learning to function without the psychic unity they'd relied on for millennia. It was painful for them, like suddenly hearing 17 different voices inside their head instead of one harmonious choir. Sarah had told them that was called being alive. Ambassador Rodriguez joined her at the viewport, holding 2 cups of something that almost tasted like coffee. The Korath delegation wants to thank you personally, he said. Again, I think this is the 15th time, Sarah smiled. They're still processing. 12 years of missing memories is a lot to integrate. Speaking of integration, Rodriguez continued, the Valdrine Council has formally invited humanity to join the Galactic Coalition. Full membership. Voting rights. The works. As what? Sarah asked. The Chaos Specialists? Actually, Rodriguez laughed. The official title is Neural Diversity Consultants. Apparently half the galaxy is realizing that psychic unity might not be the ideal they thought it was. They want to learn how we function with our messy minds. Sarah thought about that, about teaching the galaxy to be more human, to argue with themselves, to doubt, to question, to think thoughts that contradicted and confused and led nowhere and everywhere at once. It won't be easy, she said quietly. Chaos is harder than order. Freedom is harder than control. Being human is exhausting. Yeah, Rodriguez agreed, but it's also beautiful. Outside the viewport, ships from 24 species moved through space, Korath and Mevlon, Trath and Orvex, even a few Valdrine vessels, all flying their own paths instead of following a single pattern. It was messy, inefficient, imperfect. It was free. Sarah raised her almost coffee in a silent toast to the complicated, contradictory, impossibly human galaxy they'd helped create. And somewhere in the back of her mind, in that chaotic space where 1,000 thoughts competed for attention, she smiled, because humanity had finally found its place among the stars, not as conquerors, not as servants, but as living proof that the most powerful force in the universe isn't order or control or perfect harmony. It's the courage to think your own thoughts, sing your own songs, and live your own beautifully messy life, even if, especially if, that life makes no sense at all.